You know, as we all know, life can be very interesting. There's always variety. There's always differing experiences and perspectives. There's always activity. There's always something going on. And as we navigate the life's journey, we hope to be present to each and every one of our experiences. We hope to be available. We hope to show up as our best self, our greatest self, our most grand self. And we hope to navigate these experiences in a way that is fruitful and beneficial and positive. And sometimes we just hope not to screw it up. And in some respects, we are able to successfully navigate different experiences. And sometimes things don't quite go the way we would like for them to go, in spite of our best efforts, or sometimes even if we're not able to muster our best efforts. Things happen. The talk title that seemed to resonate with me is Life's Twists and Turns. Because there are things that we really hope to happen. There are things that we would like to happen. Things that we know really need to happen. And there's certainly things we definitely don't want to happen at all. But then the lived experience of life shows up, and things happen that we sometimes don't expect. And it can be a real challenge as to how we respond to those moments and those times. And what's really true is when moments of challenge come about, those moments how you respond, how we respond individually and collectively, it lets us know as a measuring stick and as an indicator just where we are in emotional growth, where we are in spiritual growth, where we are in our human evolvement and development. And things happen that show us ourselves. Certainly here at Unity of Wichita over the last 2-3 years, we've undergone a lot of shifting and a lot of change and a lot of transition. A lot of things have happened that were wonderful, beautiful, life and soul affirming things. And sometimes things happen that are unfortunate, that are unexpected. Things we might not have seen coming. So in these twists and turns of life, how do we navigate this twisty, windy road? And how do we do it in a way that not only allows us to navigate through it, but allows us to navigate through in a way that promotes goodness, in a way that promotes good things like understanding, compassion, love, healing, support. Thank you, Cowboy Mike. I love you. So we meet these moments. And we always hope that when these moments come, we show up as our best selves. We show up as the self that is present, the self that is compassionate, the self that is open. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes it doesn't happen. And when situations and things occur, and there's trouble in the waters, and we hear certain things that have happened, when word gets out about some unfortunate incident or circumstance that happens. How do we meet that moment? Do we meet that moment from a centered place to really take in what's going on and to leverage ourselves as a healing influence? Or do we meet that moment letting the ego capacity of the mind take over? Because one thing that we know is the mind is a meaning-making machine. And when questionable things appear to arise and situations appear to come up that don't seem pleasing, that don't seem right, the mind is very adept at coming up with questions and coming up with answers. Whether those answers really square with the lived reality of what's going on is another matter. But the mind will come up with those answers. And if we give emotional energy to those answers, sometimes those answers can be consistent with reality, and sometimes they may not. And if those answers are not consistent and they take on a life of their own, then it can sometimes add to the disharmony that's going on. So these are all part of the twists and turns of life. We've all experienced situations. We've all gone through certain things that are challenging, things we didn't expect. It's part of the human condition. There's no way to avoid it. And I even contend that even if you sell everything you have, go live on a mountain somewhere, you'll still get into situations with the raccoons or the snakes or whatever else, the trees or whatever else is there. So it's about showing up at these moments. And how do we show up at these moments in a way where it's centered, a way where we can be present? If I were to ask you all what that object is, you would say to me that it is a lamp. You might say that it is a light, for certainly a lamp is a device that gives off light, that illuminates so that we can see. And it is proper to refer to this as a light to distinguish it from a microphone and distinguish it from a piano, distinguish it from a chair or a podium. So since we have a physical aspect to our existence, we can distinguish this by saying that it's a light. When it comes to the understanding of what light actually is, this is not a light. I'm going to say that again. This is not a light. The essence of what light is electromagnetic radiation. It exists over a wide spectrum of frequency and wavelength, and this electromagnetic radiation is ever present. Wherever you go on the planet, there's electromagnetic radiation in the atmosphere. What this device is, it is a device that is designed to harness some of that electromagnetic radiation in the form of an electrical system, power to the outlets, and it illuminates as a light. This is not a light. This is evidence that light is present. Can you distinguish the difference here? This gives light. It illuminates. It's not the electrical essence of what life is. It is a device that is situated to harness light. Same thing with us. When we are prayerful, when we are meditative, when we are contemplative, when we open and avail ourselves to spirit, we are able to harness the ever-presence of God into our localized expression and make ourselves open and available to that presence so that we can be an outpicturing of the good, the love, the wisdom, the understanding, the faith of what the divine actually is. And if we can get into a place of centeredness, knowing that the divine is fully and completely present, whether you're in the room that is lit up to the high heavens, or you're in a room that is completely dark, the divine is always fully and completely present. Wherever we are, God is. That's the foundation for being able to navigate any and all of life's experiences, any and all challenges of life, to know that we're not dealing with these situations alone. The divine is fully and completely present, waiting to express in and through and as willing hearts and souls to be able to be present to the challenge. And when we do this, it doesn't mean that the challenge goes away. It doesn't mean that the challenge suddenly evaporates. What it means is that we can be more centered and present with being available in sitting with the challenge so that we can navigate through that challenge from a centered place. Put our best foot forward to be patient with one another, to be more compassionate with one another, to be more understanding of one another, to be more accountable to one another. We could use a lot of that here. We could use a lot. Once we are from this centered place, it is easy to believe that once I'm centered, once I'm present, everything will magically fall into place. And sometimes that happens. But sometimes we need to engage more of divinity, particularly engaging more of our divinity as we express our humanity. One of the things that well-meaning spiritual people do is we create a division between divinity and humanity. Our humanness is one thing, our divinity is something else. Our divinity is an expression, our humanity is an expression of divinity. Our humanity is an aspect of God mind, divine mind. If that were not true, humanity wouldn't exist. So we can be spiritual and be human at the same time. They're not in conflict, but there is definitely a humanly way to surrender that to the divine so that our humanity can be godly, can be more loving, can be more compassionate. And to crystallize that, I wanted to go to Scripture, and I want to read from 2 Peter, starting with verse 5. And besides this, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue, and to virtue knowledge, and to knowledge temperance, and to temperance patience, and to patience godliness, and to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness charity. For these things be in you and abound, they make you that shall neither be barren nor unfruitful in the knowledge of Christ. So it starts with a divine idea of faith, which we know in unity. Faith is the perceiving power of the mind, linked with the ability to shape substance. When faith is at its most efficient expression, we may start off in our spiritual growth with having faith in God, but as we mature in divinity, we move from having faith in God to the faith of God. So faith is this divine idea. But then it's telling us to add brotherly kindness, add temperance, add knowledge, add these human characteristics to our faith. So when we come from our spiritual centering, in our spiritual perspective, to illuminate and enhance that spiritual perspective, we have to be intentional with how we do our humanity so that we do our humanity in ways that magnify the divine and not magnify the lowest part of our humanness. Does that make sense? So we have to be mindful of how we relate to one another. We have to be mindful of how we speak to one another. We have to be mindful of how we think about one another and how we interact with one another. And we have to be mindful of these things because we can bring something in our human expression that undermines and undercuts what the divine is seeking to create in our relationships. So that's how we navigate forward. We come from a centered place, from doing our prayer and meditation and affirmation work. And from that centered place, we carry that in, and it manifests itself in more listening, more patience, the willingness to be comfortable with sometimes being uncomfortable. If godliness requires that I sit in an uncomfortable space, like the very real uncomfortable space that I'm in right now, if divinity is best served, then that's what I must do to honor the divinity that is. And one thing that I know about this church, from the short 5 years that I've been here, this is a very loving spiritual community. This is a very welcoming spiritual community. And I'm saying that as a person who has been blessed by this community. Over the last 5 years of my personal family, we've experienced passings and transitions more than I care to count. And this community has come alongside of me and walked with me through those journeys. And I've been a part of this community when we come alongside of other people. I've seen it where people might be in the hospital and members of this community go and visit that person. And not just the official people like the senior minister or the prayer chaplains. I've seen where this community rallies together. I've seen where this community comes together. I've seen the heart of Unity of Wichita. That doesn't mean we always get it right. And most certainly, we don't get it right all the time. But I've seen the heart of this community. And I know the beauty of this spiritual community. I intimately know it. And we are going to have to rally together and connect together, perhaps in ways and at levels that we haven't done before. But this is a prayer-conditioned place, a God-centered place, and as long as we are willing to avail ourselves to the light, we will move onward, upward, and Godward. I love you, and I hold you all in very sacred space. And my humble prayer for this spiritual community is light, life, and love to you all. God bless you.